Good evening. This is VK3EKH and it's got my SWR, that's why. 1 2 1 2 1 2. Just checking why there's no level on 80 meters. 1 2 3. Oh, that's better, right? Okay, that's okay. Just doing a minor adjustments here on 80 meters. 1 2 3 4. I think that's okay. Good evening. This is VK3 Echo Kilo Hotel, VK3 EKH, the official station of the Astronomical Society of Victoria, with the regular Friday night broadcast coming to you from the studios of VK3 CSJ in Narre Warren South. We're broadcasting on prime frequency of 3541 kilohertz in the 80 metre amateur radio band, lower sideband, and also transmitting via the Melbourne television repeater, VK3 RTV, digital channel 1. I can hear myself coming through something. Anyway, we're also streaming on YouTube, Struth, and which you can find on my channel, VK3CSJ. Just type in VK3CSJ in the search engine for YouTube, and all should be revealed. Also, we have a email address, vk3ekh@gmail.com, vk3ekh@gmail.com. Any signal reports and the like can be sent to that address. I'm looking at the inbox as I speak, and we also have a Discord chat window. So if you install Discord and look for ASV radio, a link or whatever it's called, you'll find it. We're also this will be next Friday. I won't be broadcasting here. Next Friday and Saturday is the ATV QSO party, so I shall be involved with that activity. The QSO party tends to I think it kicks off at about 8 o'clock and heads into the late hours of the evening, maybe to about 11 o'clock, depends on how many stations there are. But anyway, yes, the ATV QSO party is next week, and for those who can't view the repeater directly, you'll be able to see it via the British Amateur Television Club, BATC. On their video server, just look for the online repeaters on their video server tab, VK3R2V1, and that should work. But also Ian, VK3 Quebec Lima, will have a YouTube channel running for as long as he can, and that'll be another way of being able to view the activities for Friday and I believe Saturday as well. Saturday, for the Friday night session, there will be crosses to various dates, VK5, VK2, hopefully VK7, maybe VK4, but nevertheless it'll be a round robin for all the stations in Australia that are happy to come up on the ATV side of things. And then Saturday morning, I think from probably 10 o'clock, will be the same thing, but mostly crosses to America and the ATV stations over there in the States, and that'll go on till after midday, no doubt. Anyway, it's always interesting to see how it all comes together, and we will all have a bit of fun. And it's always the audio that we trip up over. Hopefully that part might be a bit smoother running this time. Anyway, good evening everybody, here on the 18th of August. And like I say, there won't be any ASV broadcast next Friday due to the ATV QSO party. All right, we have a few little articles tonight, and we have a report from Tamitha Scove, our space weather woman. It's only a day old. She put out this report earlier in the week, so it encompasses most of this week just gone. So it'll be just a highlight report of the solar activity for this the week just gone. So just to fill up 14 minutes of the last part of the hour, that's all I'm really aiming for. Anyways, all right. I can see Steve, VK3SPX, is there on the chat window. G'day, Steve. G'day, Kim, VK5FUSE. And howdy, Remus from rainy Melbourne. Yeah, I know. It's been a shocker today. And I think it's going to be pretty much the same tomorrow. Absolutely cold as. It's currently 9.1 degrees here in Narrewarren South, which has been like that all day, I think. The Astronomical Society of Victoria, founded 1922, comprises well over 1,600 members throughout Victoria, Australia and overseas. Membership of the Society is open to anyone with an interest in astronomy. The Society's objectives are to encourage the study and practice of astronomy and to disseminate the knowledge of the science and to provide greater facilities for the study among its members. Monthly meetings are usually held on the second Wednesday of each month, except January, with the latter being held on a Saturday night. Meetings start at 8 p.m. in the Morley Hall, National Herbarium, Burwood Avenue, Melbourne, near the Melbourne Observatory. Parking is available Burwood Avenue, Dallas Brooks Drive and the surrounding streets. Admission is free and visitors are most welcome. I think the next monthly meeting we should be able to get back into the hall. For some reason there's been some renovating going on at the in that area, and various things have been out of bounds, but I believe that the next monthly meeting we should be back into the hall. If not, it'll be all on Zoom anyway, or YouTube, the ASV's YouTube channel. Privileges of membership include the right to borrow books, periodicals and other publications from the Society's extensive library located at Melbourne Observatory, receipt of the ASV's magazine Crux, containing articles, news, observing notes and the like, and the free provision of the Astronomical Yearbook. Monthly Yearbook. Yep. Access is available to telescopes on members' nights held regularly at the Melbourne Observatory and after monthly meetings, weather permitting. These instruments include the Society's 300mm equatorial reflector and a 300mm portable reflector. There's also a 200mm refractor managed by the Royal Botanic Gardens, and a photoheliograph are also housed at the observatory and are accessible to members as well. The Society also has a number of 200mm reflectors available for short period loan, so members can try before they buy. Members are also encouraged to make use of the Society's country property, located just near Heathcote, some 90-minute drive north of Melbourne. There are a range of instruments available for members to use, the larger to only with appropriate training, which range from 300mm to 1000mm in aperture. Also located on the site is a fully steerable 8.5 metre radio telescope, which members can access with involvement in the radio astronomy section. Members are encouraged to make and use telescopes. Advice and help on both matters are provided willingly to newcomers desiring to do the same. Instrument making is only one of the number of common interest activities catered for within the Society. Other areas of interest that members can participate in include deep sky observing, astrophotography, lunar and planetary observing, auroral meteor comet radio astronomy, computing, cosmology and astrophysics, historical studies, and research and astronomy in general. Contact details for various section directors are provided in the yearbook. Further information may be obtained by visiting the ASV website, and notifications of events are given in the Crux Extra Bulletins, which is a email publication to members sent out every other week when things come through. Please note that ASV will conform to all government directives, health directives. ASV events may be required to be cancelled, moved or postponed as a result. If you wish to write a letter to the ASV wanting a letter in response, you can write to the Secretary, the Astronomical Society of Victoria, GPO Box 1059, Melbourne, Victoria 3001. and or go to the ASV website at www.asv.org.au. That's www.asv.org.au, and it all will be revealed on that website. Contact details for section directors. There's this, if you look under the sections tab, you'll see 21 sections, and each section you can click on, which opens up a separate page, and it goes into a little bit of detail about what the section's involved with, and contact details for the section director. So you can pay a visit, request that if you want to pay a visit, that sort of thing. You're tuned to ASV Radio, VK3 EKH, in broadcasting since 1988. Okay, g'day to David, VK3 KDM, who's just joined us on the chat window, as well as Martin, VK7JAH. Hope the signals are good tonight. Looking at the propagation chart, it's not looking too crash hot at the moment for 80 metres, so I'm not too certain how far interstate I'm making it, but certainly looking at the propagation chart at the moment, where 80 metres isn't really favourable at the moment, if you believe that. Okay, let's get into the swing of it, because I've got to try and get what I've got over and done with in 30 minutes. So says I. Alright, the first thing I am going to mention is New Horizons is now so far away it can measure the true darkness of space. I've just got a little bit of a picture here of New Horizons. It's just a kind of a artist illustration, but it will do for the time being, for the duration of this short article. There it is. This was published space.com, 17th of August, by Brian Coberlin, Universe Today. Just how dark is the night sky, you may ask yourselves. If you step outside during a moonless night and look up, it probably doesn't look that dark at all. Streetlights, and I might just take a pause here for a second. In that interesting sentence there, if you have an infrared thermometer, electronic infrared thermometer, one that fires a little laser beams, so you can point at your area that you're of interest to measure the temperature. Let me just go back to camera. I'm being naughty going off the subject here like this. In fact, I should have brought it up here. But if you shine that up at the night sky at night time, you actually are measuring temperature of the sky. Isn't that interesting? And it's quite a legitimate thing. Somebody's written a paper on it, but a good quality thermometer, electronic thermometer, one of those ones that you have that sends a little laser beam out, and so you can point at something to get its surface temperature. You go outside and point it up at the night sky, and right up directly above your head, and it will measure a negative reading. It'll be measuring temperature directly in the sky above you. Just thought I'd mention that. Something I might add to my weather station at some point in time. I just thought I'd mention that. Back to the article. Okay. Yeah. Alrighty then. If you step outside during a moonless night and look up, it probably doesn't look that dark at all, depending on where you are. Street lights or nearby porch lights fill the air with a background glow, particularly if they happen to be bluish-white LEDs. Light pollution in your neighbourhood is likely so bad that you can only see a few bright stars. Even in somewhat rural areas, our skies are so bright that the Milky Way isn't really visible. Well, it depends on where you are. In North America and Europe, only about a quarter of children have seen the Milky Way. To get away from all that light pollution, you need to travel to a pretty remote corner of the world. One of the most remote is the Andean Desert in Chile. If you have a chance to visit one of the major observatories there, you can catch a glimpse of the darkest skies in the world. On a moonless night, with the Milky Way overhead, you can see a vast sea of stars and shadows constellations along the multicoloured glow of the galactic centre. The skies are so dark, the Milky Way casts a faint shadow you can see when your eyes are fully dark and adapted. Well, you can actually get that at our dark sky location at Heathcote. I can confirm that because I've done it. But even that is not a true dark sky. Our atmosphere emits a faint glow even in the darkest night. It's caused by ultraviolet sunlight and cosmic rays which ionise the Earth's upper atmosphere. This air glow isn't noticeable when we look directly overhead, but it's there, and it limits the view Earth-based telescopes. Even our best observatories have to deal with light pollution. So we launch telescopes into space beyond our atmosphere. The Hubble and the Webb telescopes surely get a pure view of the sky, or the heavens. Wondrous as their images are, they don't capture the truly dark sky, it seems. Sun glow is still an issue. Our solar system is filled with diffuse dust, and every particle scatters light back toward our world. On Earth, we can see this dust-scattered glow as zodiacal light. It's faint to our eyes, but visible even in space. The night of interplanetary space is dark, but still not dark enough. To get a real view of the dark sky, we would need to travel beyond the dust, to the furthest edge of the solar system, far beyond the orbit of Pluto. Voyagers 1 and 2 have travelled that far, as have Pioneers 10 and 11. We've long lost contact with the Pioneers, and while we still communicate with the Voyagers, they can't transmit any useful images to us. But there is a distant spacecraft that can. New Horizons flew past Pluto in 2015 and then past the Kuiper Belt object, Arakoth. It is now twice as distant from the Sun and its cameras can still gather data. Recently, the New Horizons team tried to capture the fragile darkness of the universe. They aimed New Horizons at a patch of the sky far away from the Milky Way, away from the Sun and away from bright stars. Then they measured how much light the camera captured. When they compared that amount to the amount captured by Hubble's view of the dark sky, they found it was darker by an expected amount. But there is still some faint glow astronomers can't explain. If you calculate the background light, you'd expect some distant galaxies all the way back to the Big Bang. New Horizons measured about twice as much, so the team planned to observe 15 other dark locations over the next month, hoping to see the naked dark of cosmos, or to verify this mysterious background glow. And perhaps, though through the darkest skies, we will see the light. That's what I like. Nice and short articles. You're tuned to ASV VK3 Echo Kilo Hotel, the official station of the Astronomical Society of Victoria, with the regular Friday night cast missions. No emails. Send me emails, gentlemen. James Webb Space Telescope takes a peek at the most distant known star. It almost seems weekly we get a heading like that, don't we, from James Webb Telescope. Anyway, here's another one. This was published 16th of August by Samantha Hill. And I'll throw up this image while it's there. We'll go to this one first. Okay. What we're seeing there is an image by James Webb Space Telescope near infrared camera NIRC cam. There is the galaxy cluster WHL0137-08, along with the farthest, that's what it says, the farthest known star, Arendelle. Okay, I'm not sure which star that is specifically in this picture, but that's what they say. Anyway, let's continue on with the article. The farthest known star in the universe was recently observed by James Webb Space Telescope, JWST, following up on the Hubble Space Telescope's 2022 discovery. Although it appears as a tiny dot in the image, the star is a gateway to understanding the conditions in the very early universe. Nicknamed Arendelle, this star sits among the red-orange curved visage of the Sunrise Arc galaxy, just southeast of the bright star sporting large diffraction spikes in the image. Now I'll go to another image because it highlights this particularly. Alright, so we're looking at that square and then bringing it up. You can actually see some gravitational lensing going on there in that image too. Back to the article. Spikes in the image here. Data from the James Webb Space Telescope's near-infrared camera now have indicated it is a large B-type star more than twice as hot as our Sun, as well as dramatically more luminous, according to a NASA news release. According to the release, astronomers are also believe that Arendelle may have a companion, a smaller, cooler sun in its system. Although the companion was not definitively detected, there are clues to its presence in Arendelle's light. The image is noticeably dominated by a huge galaxy cluster WHL0137-08, which is what allowed scientists to view Arendelle. Thanks to gravitational lensing, this scientific phenomenon occurs when massive celestial objects like WHL0137-08 bend the fabric of space-time around them, which magnifies and distorts light from objects behind them. This is why the Sunrise Arc galaxy looks like a curved line, as this galaxy's image is distorted by a gravitational lens. Also featured in this image are other objects in the Sunrise Arc. These include both young star forming regions and older star clusters, seen as small dots on either side of Arendelle. Arendelle shines at a time that is just about 1 billion years after the Big Bang. While it's still the earliest known star, other famous distant stars include the red giant Keeler, which was created 3 billion years after the Big Bang. Between James Webb Space Telescope and Hubble, there is hope that scientists will someday detect the very first generation of stars, suns made up of only hydrogen and helium. So we are nearer by far, but nearer to viewing the very beginnings of the universe by eye. That's very, very faint light indeed. You're tuned to VK3 Echo Kilo Hotel, the official station of the Astronomical Society of Victoria. Now, this is a little bit of an interesting article, but yeah, I thought it was interesting. I thought it was interesting. You may not. There's actually some video footage at the end of this article, which is actually quite interesting. It only goes for 3 minutes. So if you're not watching the vision side of this, I would suggest tuning into my YouTube channel, VK3CSJ. Look for the live symbol. I know it's 20 seconds behind what I'm saying here. You just got to have to put up with that. But there's some very interesting video, and a little on the scary side. But that's the way the space program was in the early days. How many astronauts have died in space, you might ask? There's no doubt space is an extremely dangerous place, but only a handful of space travellers have actually died there. Published August 17. For many wannabe astronauts, the idea of entering into the great unknown would be a dream come true. But over the past 50 years, there's been a slew of spaceflight related tragedies that are more akin to an astronaut's worst nightmare. In the last half century, about 30 astronauts and cosmonauts have died while training for or attempting dangerous space missions. But the vast majority of these deaths occurred either on the ground or in Earth's atmosphere, below the accepted boundary of space called the Kármán line, which begins at an altitude of about 100 kilometres. However, of the roughly 550 people who have so far ventured into space, only 3 have actually died there. Early in the space race, both NASA and the USSR experienced a surge in deadly jet crashes that killed a number of pilots testing advanced rocket-propelled planes. Then, of course, there was the Apollo 1 fire in January 1967, which killed astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee in a horrific manner. During a launch simulation, a stray spark within the cabin of the ground spacecraft, which was filled with pure oxygen, ignited. This led to an uncontrollable fire that quickly overwhelmed and doomed the crew, leading to their tragic deaths as they struggled in vain to open the pressurized hatch door. And I've got a image here of, I believe it's astronaut Gus Grissom's flight suit following the Apollo 1 fire in 1967, which killed Grissom. So that's what's left of his spacesuit, which is fairly shocking to look at, actually. Continuing on, we had done exactly the same test the night before, but without the hatch closed, so we weren't on 100% oxygen, Walter Cunningham, lunar module pilot of Apollo 7, told Astronomy. So when the Apollo 1 crew died, it was a couple of weeks later before they started picking up the pieces, and at which point we were assigned the prime crew of the first manned Apollo mission. A little less than 2 years later, in October 1968, Cunningham, Wally Schirra and Don Elsey became the first Apollo crew to successfully venture into space. I'll just come back to me. The Soyuz 11 disaster. The first space station to park itself above Earth's atmosphere was the USSR Soyuz 1, which launched unmanned on April 19, 1971. Just a few days later, a crew of 3 Soviets blasted off aboard Soyuz 10 with the goal of entering the space station and staying in orbit for a full month. Though the Soyuz 10 crew docked safely with Soyuz 1, issues with the entry hatch prevented them from entering the space station. During their premature return trip back to Earth, toxic chemicals leaked into the air supply of Soyuz 10, causing one cosmonaut to pass out. However, all 3 members of the crew ultimately made it home safe with no long-lasting effects. Just a few months later, on June 6th, the Soyuz 11 mission took another crack at accessing the space station. Unlike the previous crew, the 3 Soyuz 11 cosmonauts, George Dobrovsky and Vladimir Volkov and Viktor Petskov, successfully entered Soyuz 1. Once aboard, they spent the next 3 weeks not only setting a new record for the longest time spent in space, but also carrying out loads of experiments focused on how the human body deals with extended periods of weightlessness. And there's a picture of these three guys here. Okay, there's they are. From left to right, cosmonauts Georgy Dorovsky, Vladislav Volkov in the middle, and Viktor Patskev at the right. The only three people to die in space. On June 29, the cosmonauts loaded back into Soyuz 11 spacecraft and began their descent to Earth. And that's when tragedy struck. To those on the ground, everything about Soyuz 11's re-entry seemed to go off without a hitch. The spacecraft appeared to make it through the atmosphere just fine. Ultimately landing in Kazakhstan as planned, it wasn't until recovery crews opened the hatch and they discovered all three crew members inside were dead. And here's another shot, which is a little bit more shocking. In this picture which you're seeing at the moment, after discovering the unresponsive Soyuz 11 crew, recovery teams futilely attempted CPR, seen here in this screenshot of declassified footage that appeared in the Russian TV documentary Death of the Soyuz. Outwardly, there was no damage whatsoever, recalled Kremen Kromov, chair of the State Commission. In Ben Evans' book Foothold in the Heavens, the recovery crew knocked on the side, but there was no response from within. On opening the hatch, they found all three men in their couches motionless, with dark blue patches on their faces and trails of blood from their noses and ears. They removed them from the descent module. Dorovsky was still warm. The doctors gave artificial respiration. Based on their reports, the cause of death was suffocation. The fatal accident was determined to be the result of faulty valve seal on the spacecraft's descent vehicle that burst open during its separation from the surface module at an altitude of 168 kilometers. The deadly combination of a leaking valve and vacuum of space rapidly sucked all the air out of the crew cabin, depressurizing it, and because the valve was hidden below the cosmonauts' seats, it would have been nearly impossible for them to have fixed the problem in time. As a direct result of the decompression deaths of Soyuz 11 crew, the USSR quickly made the shift to requiring all cosmonauts to wear pressurized spacesuits during re-entry, and of course it's a practice that's still in place today. Now I'm going to just run this short video which sort of deals with this subject matter a little bit. Let's see if we can get this to fire up.
But the ultimate and most dangerous test was a huge, specially constructed vacuum chamber.
They were able to pull all the air out, create a big vacuum, just like it would be on the moon. That way we could test our suits to make sure there was no leakage.
One such test narrowly avoided disaster. Jim LeBlanc was the test subject in the vacuum chamber. Cliff Hess, the supervising engineer outside.
Jim, while you're exercising, I'd like you to stay intermediate all the time, okay?
I'm pretty cool right now.
Okay, well, you'll warm up here in a minute, so let's stay right here if you can stand it.
The testing started just normally, like they all do. And Jim was at a vacuum in the spacesuit.
Well, I feel pretty good here.
With all the air sucked out, all that protected him was his pressurized suit. Then something happened.
I heard over the headset that he was losing suit pressure.
The tube pressurizing his suit had become disconnected.
Inlet valve is open.
He was in serious danger.
Pressurize the chamber.
There really wasn't any feeling. It was just happening so fast, trying to get the chamber back to a safe pressure and Jim to a safe pressure. It was inside the suit.
As I stumbled backwards, I could feel the saliva on my tongue starting to bubble just before I went unconscious. And that's kind of the last thing I remember.
Essentially, he had no pressure on the outside of his body, and that's a very unusual case to get, and there's very little in the medical literature as to what happens when you have that. There's a lot of conjecture, that your fluids will boil.
Within 25 seconds, a co-worker, sitting in a partially pressurized antechamber and wearing an oxygen mask, was able to dash in. At the normal rate of repressurization, it would have taken 30 minutes to make the chamber safe. Hess repressurized it in just over a minute.
That's much, much faster than you would ever come down in an airplane. It would really hurt your ears if you did that.
Finally, it was safe to let a doctor in. Miraculously, LeBlanc had already regained consciousness.
When I stood up in the chamber, I felt fine. My ears ached a little bit from the course of rapid repressurization, and that's basically the only effect I had.
This was one of the few instances where anybody was ever exposed to that low of a pressure and lived to tell about it with no obvious damage.
Such an accident in space would have been fatal. But thanks to testing like this, no astronaut has ever had to face a similar situation.
Yep, all right, we're back again. It's the good old audio mixer. There's a little button that I've got to remember to flick between video and live. All right, so anyway, that particular footage is part of the article that I was just reading out, which you can find astronomy.com. Astronomy.com under the news tab, and look for how many astronauts have died in space, article August 17. Thanks to astronomy.com. All right. Russia's Luna 25 moonlander snaps its first photo of the lunar surface. And we have a picture of that. Where are we? There it is. So just quickly on this one. The image from lunar orbit shows a crater called Zeeman on the moon's far side near the South Pole. It's the first detailed photo of the moon's surface taken by Russia's Luna 25 spacecraft. The image, which the nation's space agency Roscosmos released on August 17, was taken from orbit and shows a landscape on the moon's far side near the South Pole. Russia's first moon mission in nearly 50 years keeps notching milestones. The Luna 25 lander has snapped its first detailed photo. Pictured is the South Pole crater Zeeman on the far side. Luna 25 launched on August 10, marking the first of a new era for Russian space exploration. The last Russian moon probe to take flight was Luna 24 in 1976, when the nation was still part of the Soviet Union. Luna 25 snapped its first space photos on Sunday, August 13, capturing selfies with the distant moon and Earth in the background. That's another image which I haven't got. Luna 25 remains in lunar orbit, but it won't be there for long. The probe is scheduled to make a touchdown touchdown try in the coming days, perhaps as soon as August 21. The lander will aim for a patch of grey dirt near the moon's south pole, an area thought to be rich in water ice. If Luna 25 sticks to the landing, the spacecraft will hunt for water ice and perform a variety of other investigations during a surface mission expected to last 1 year, 1 Earth year. So things are looking good so far for Luna 25. Now, as an update for the Indian space lander, moon lander, Indian's Chandrayaan-3 moon lander successfully preparates and prepares for August 23rd touchdown. And there's only one image here I've got thus far. It's not a super sharp, clear image, but that's the only one I can find at the moment for those watching the video. Indian's Chandrayaan-3 lunar lander is flying on its own ahead of a historic landing attempt. The Indian Space Research Organisation said Thursday, August 17, its Chandrayaan-3 moon lander is now flying on its own after separating from the propulsion module that brought it to the lunar realms. Thanks for the ride, mate, SIRO officials tweeted from the mission's account, as the agency accounted the successful deployment ahead of the expected moon landing attempt on August 23. Chandrayaan-3 launched on July 14 into a highly elliptical and oval-shaped Earth orbit. It gradually raised its altitude before an engine burn on July 31 to head for the moon. Then it entered orbit around the moon on August 5. The 6 million rupee, or $37 million US, Chandrayaan-3 mission aims to bring India onto the surface with a precise landing near the moon's south pole. Only the United States, the former Soviet Union, and China have made soft landings on the surface before. The lander, called Vikram, V-I-K Ram, carries on board a small rover called Pragyan. The mission calls for the duo to explore the surface for a lunar day, about 14 Earth days, until the dark, cold lunar night likely depletes both of their batteries. India isn't the only country in recent memory to attempt a soft landing. Japan's iSpace had a land that apparently crashed during a flight earlier this year. Okay, enough of that. So everything's looking on the cards for both the Russian Luna 25 and the Chandrayaan-3 practically this weekend. So yeah, it should be interesting to see how that all turns out for them. Have I got time for this one? Oh yes, I was just going to read a few paragraphs of this. James Webb Space Telescope confirms Macy's galaxy is one of the earliest ever seen. This is published only 17 hours ago. Known for its discoverer's 9-year-old daughter, the galaxy is one of the oldest realms to be witnessed by humanity. And that's this image, which isn't really much to talk about. Though it may not look much in the images, appearing is just a glowing orange blob of light. Macy's galaxy shows that when it comes to space, appearances can be deceptive. As one of the first objects captured by the powerful James Webb Space Telescope in summer of 2022, this simple splotch represents the dawn of a new age of astronomy because of how utterly ancient it appears to be. And now scientists have officially confirmed precisely how old the universe was during the point at which we see Macy's galaxy, concluding that this realm is indeed one of the earliest ever discovered. The team's observations showed that Macy's galaxy existed when the 13.8 billion-year-old universe was just around 390 million years old, which is incredibly young for our cosmic expanse. This makes it one of the 4 earliest galaxies ever seen by human eyes. This galaxy exists at a time nearly early enough in the universe that we really were not able to see it without JWST. There's more to this article. It goes on for a bit, but I'll leave that one there. That's an article on space.com. Space.com under the one of the tabs. I think it might be the astronomy tab. All right, and just another little plug for astroviz.com. Bring up the slide, Clint. Okay, again, a little plug for astrophys.com. Brendan O'Brien's just released episode 177, which is this lady, Professor Michelle Kluver, and her title of her interview is Things That Go Bump in the Mid-Infrared. And just checking the article here. Okay, I thought that might have been something. Anyway, something I could read out, but there's not. Okay, anyway, that's the latest podcast, Astrophys 177. Professor Michelle Kluver talking about things that go bump in the mid-infrared. And you can find that on astrophys.com with a PH. Okay, now let's just go straight into Tamitha's solar report. If I can include, there she is, and just do that. And let's go straight into Tamitha. This should finish close to the top of the hour. You're tuned to ASV Radio, VK3 Echo Kilo Hotel, with the official ASV broadcast news on Friday nights. That's all that. Oh dear.
After a ton of activity, our sun finally gives us a break, but more storming is still in store. That story and more in the news this week. If you want to learn how weather from our star causes impacts at the Earth that shape the future of our world, join Professors Dr. Jenny Meehan, Michael Cook, and myself as we guide you through a space weather certificate program like no other. To enroll in the Space Weather and Environment Science program offered at Millersville University, go to millersville.edu/SWEN. It's weather for the 21st century. This forecast also sponsored in part by CW Ops. Space weather calms down a ton this week as we take a look at our Earth-facing disk. The main region for this is because we've said goodbye to regions 3380, 86, and 87. Region 3386, in fact, launched several X-class flares as it rotated to the sun's west limb, and these big flares impacted radio communications in a big way, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. Meanwhile, we've had even more M-class flares from region 3387, but thankfully it is now rotated to the sun's west limb, and what we're left with is much quieter. We're basically dealing with region 3394-95. These two regions, especially region 3395, as it rotates to the sun's west limb, it might pick up in big flare activity, so that could be a couple days from now, so get ready. On top of that, we also have a new region. This region may be labeled region 3402. On the 11th, it launched a big solar storm to the east of Earth. Not going to be Earth-directed, but we're going to pay attention to that region as well. On top of that, we also have a big coronal hole in the north. This one's going to be rotating into the Earth strike zone here over the next maybe 3 days, and it could give us some fast solar wind. Now, it's not in the prime position to give us a lot of fast solar wind, but aurora photographers, if you're at high latitudes, you could get a bit of a show, not nearly like what we had just a few days ago, but it still could be a great thing for you. Meanwhile, we don't really have a lot else going on the Earth-facing disk. We're going to have to wait for all of the activity that's going to be on the sun's far side. Switching to our M-flare and dayside radio blackout threat meter, as we take a look at the X-ray flux over this past week, look at all the big flares you see in here. These were ranging from an R1 to an R3 level radio blackout, and they were mainly from region 3386 and then also 3387. In fact, the two big X flares you see here were from region 3386, and they happened when the western hemisphere was on the day side of Earth. As we take a look at the impact of the WhisperNet, you can definitely see HF radio communications were impacted during the big flare on the 7th. And we also had big radio bursts included that went clear up into the Ka band. This means that we had radio bursts that it impacted GPS reception, satellite phone reception, and even up to Starlink frequencies. So we definitely had satellite radio communication interrupted for a little bit. And if you had issues during these days, it wasn't your technology, it just was the reception. So don't worry about it. Meanwhile, things have finally calmed down. We're back to hovering around the seafloor, and with only C-class flares, but things are beginning to ramp up again. And that's mainly because we've got some new regions that are about to rotate into Earth view. So big flares might be back on the menu here in the next couple days. Switching to our radiation storm conditions, over this past week we've actually been dealing with two different radiation storms. The first occurred on the 5th, and you can see it jumped up to S1 levels quite quickly. And this can mean issues for geolocation and navigation, as well as HF communication, especially over the poles with the aviators. But that's not the only thing. You can also see the blue line rise. That is a higher energy particles, and this means issues for satellite operators. In fact, as we take a look at the conditions and probabilities for impacts to satellites in the geo orbit, you can definitely see starting on the 5th, we had a high concern for single event effects, and this was occurring during the big geomagnetic storm as well, so that compounded the issues. Plus, then you can see also concerns for total dose rising. And that's not the only thing. This was for the first radiation storm. As we pick up to the second radiation storm, you can see there's also high energy component as well. And again, now we're dealing with even a stronger total dose component. So satellite operators, especially in geo, if you've been experiencing some issues, well, this is part of the reason why. So things luckily are beginning to calm down, and it looks like the risk for radiation storms are also calming down. So it looks like we're going to be in the clear, at least for the next few days. Switching to our solar storm conditions, over this past week, we've had quite a bit of solar storm activity. We were expecting that train of solar storms to hit us, and indeed it did. Back on the 4th, we jumped up to active conditions when the first set of storms hit us, and then when the bigger storm hit, wham, it bumped us up to almost a G3 level and brought aurora clear down deep into mid-latitudes. As we take a look at our geochron clock, you can see when the storm really started ramping up. Sadly, Europe and the UK didn't get any of that big show. That was basically the Western Hemisphere that was on the night side at that time, and you can watch the aurora really ramp up. So we had gorgeous aurora views in Canada and cleared down deep into mid-latitudes in the United States. And then even as the storm began to wane, believe it or not, Australia and New Zealand and Tasmania, they still got a decent show. So we have some gorgeous aurora highlights that I'll talk about more in a little bit. But that was the bulk of the show, and then things kind of calmed down since then. And we've only bumped up to active conditions one other time, and that was due to some other solar storms that grazed us to the west. They really didn't make much of a showing. And then we kind of quieted back down, and now we're just waiting for that fast solar wind to hit us from that coronal hole, and we could bump back up to active conditions again in about a couple days. And during this recent G3 level solar storm, aurora was seen in many parts of the Western Hemisphere as well as down under. And I don't have the ability to share all of the gorgeous photos that aurora field reporters were gracious enough to share with me, but I'll highlight a few of them here, like this gorgeous aurora from Quebec. And we had gorgeous shots in Ontario. And of course, we had shots in Saskatchewan, as well as Alberta. And even British Columbia had some beautiful aurora. And as we drop down into the United States, aurora was seen in Maryland, and it was seen in several places in New York. It was seen clear down as far south as North Carolina. And it was seen in Illinois. It was even seen briefly in Pennsylvania. And we had aurora in Iowa. And it was even seen in Kansas. It was seen in multiple places in Colorado. And it was seen in Idaho, as well as clear down in Utah, and even in Flagstaff, Arizona. And as we go down under, aurora was seen all over the place. It was seen in many places in New Zealand. Many beautiful shots in New Zealand. It was also seen in Tasmania. and we even had aurora reach as far north as Victoria, Australia. Now, switching to our sun's far side, we can no longer use stereo A imagery because stereo A's orbit has now taken it to a place where it's basically looking at the sun from the front side, same as Earth. So in this case, we switch to our JSOC HMI helioseismology far side viewer, and we use HMI AIA imagery of the sun from about 2 weeks ago to see what's lurking on the sun's far side. And as we take a look at the helioseismology data, you can see everything in the gold is on the sun's far side, and we're looking for big dark spots. And as you watch, you can see old regions 33, 80, 86, and 87. Those are dark regions that are surviving their far side passage, and these are those big flare players, so we're keeping our eyes on them, but they won't be rotating into Earth view again for another 10 days or so. But outside of that, we also have regions, old regions 3379 and region 3382, and these regions also look like they might be surviving their far side passage, but they're not going to be rotating into Earth view for another maybe 5 days or so, possibly a little bit more. So amateur radio operators and emergency responders, hey, it looks like for the next few days, you're definitely going to have some quiet time. There's not going to be a big threat for big solar flares. So in this week, enjoy that respite, because next week, well, that's another story. Switching to our moon and meteors, we are now coming through the third quarter phase on our way to a new moon, with the new moon being on the 16th. And this is perfect considering the peak of the Perseid meteor shower is on the 12th and the 13th, when the moon will be less than 10% illuminated. So you night sky watchers, if you haven't caught the dazzling show, now is your perfect chance. Switching to our solar storm conditions and aurora possibilities over the coming week, we are sitting at unsettled conditions right now, but we do have that coronal hole that's going to be rotating in through the Earth's strike zone and sending us some fast solar wind. Now, at high latitudes, NOAA is expecting active conditions, but we do have up to a 20 to 30% chance of minor storm conditions. So aurora photographers at high latitudes, you definitely could get a show, even if it's a weak one, especially with the dark skies, because we're getting close to that new moon. So you have some good luck in store. Now, meanwhile, at mid latitudes, we're only expecting unsettled conditions, but we do have up to a 15 to 25% chance of active conditions. Again, this is starting around the 14th and could linger into the next couple days. But aurora photographers, if you're at mid latitudes, it's going to be a little bit harder for you to catch a show, but at least we have the Perseids to keep you company. Switching to our solar flare and dayside radio blackout outlook over the coming week, thankfully things have finally calmed down, especially compared to last week. The noise on the bands have dropped, the number of big active regions have dropped, and that is a blessing, obviously, but it also means that solar flux has dropped. We're sitting now at the low 150s and could even drop into the 140s before we begin to rise again, perhaps right around the latter part of this week. But the good news means that we're actually at minor noise levels on the radio bands on Earth's day side, and that's easily going to continue over the next 3 days. NOAA, in fact, is only giving us about a 25% chance of M-class flares. That's at the R1 to R2 level radio blackout, and only about a 5% chance of X-class flares. And that's at the R3 level radio blackout. And this means that we basically have big radio blackouts off the table for now, and that might change over the next maybe 3 or 4 days as some of these regions rotate to the sun's west limb and some new regions rotate into Earth view. But hey, we'll take it. It's a respite. So enjoy. If you happen to be doing dayside amateur radio operating, you're going to enjoy being able to hear contacts a lot better than you had last week. And so enjoy, because it's not going to last all that much longer. Switching to our radiation storm and polar aviation outlook over the coming week, we are dealing with the D2 minor range right now for you aviators. This is at flight level 360. This is due to the waning radiation storm that we have, and it's especially bad over the poles. But luckily, it's below the S1 level. We're just sitting at elevated levels right now, so things are definitely on their way back to normalcy. We only have about a day or two to deal with this before things go back down to the D1 minor range. In fact, NOAA's only giving us about a 15% chance of jumping up to an S1 to S2 level radiation storm over the next day or so before things go completely back down to normal range. And this is good news for you aviators as well as you frequent flyers and air crew. Just ride out the next day or so, and everything will be back in the green. So the space weather this week has calmed down substantially compared to last week. Now we do still have a little chance of storming. This is due to that coronal hole that's rotating in through the Earth's strike zone over the next couple days. Aurora photographers, if you're at high latitudes, you definitely could get a bit of a show. And if you're aurora photographers at mid latitudes, it might be a bit harder for you to get a show. But remember, we do have that new moon, and we do have the Perseids that are peaking on the 12th and the 13th. So no matter what, our night sky should be absolutely gorgeous where there are clear skies. Now, amateur radio operators and emergency responders, you should be smiling as well because those radio blackouts have really calmed down this week. Expect to get at least 2 or 3 days of quiet before things begin to ramp up a little bit. And that's due to some regions that are rotating to the sun's west limb, and they could get active just like regions 33, 86, and 87. Just kind of drove us nuts last week. We could see a little bit of that kind of activity again. And then also later in the week, we're going to have some new regions rotating in from the sun's far side, and they could be big flare players too. So just enjoy the respite. And now GPS users, well, things are looking pretty good for you right now. We don't have any really big solar storms. We just have some issues maybe at high latitudes. And then also on Earth's day side, we have the radio blackouts calming down quite a bit. So pretty much all over the globe, your GPS reception should be top-notch. I'm Tamitha Skov, the Space Weather Woman. Thank you for watching.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you, Tamitha, for her Space Weather report, which is more of a report over the last few days. But things are still afoot. I shall go straight to what's in spaceweather.com's report today, just now. All right, I'll bring up the sun. Where's the sun? This disk of the sun. All right. So as we speak, that's the disk of the sun at the moment. There's several sunspots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is marked there. 9 sunspots there currently. Current sunspot number is 135, and the radio sun, the solar flux, is currently at 152 solar flux units. As Tamitha was saying, it would come down in the low 150s. So that's measured at 10.7 centimeters. The KP index, currently the KP is 3. Considered quiet. The 24-hour max is also 3, which is considered quiet. Solar activity is currently low. There's actually very interesting footage here. It's a picture here of the sun launching its flare, a flareless CME. Isn't that an amazing image? That looks, it's very red on my monitor, not quite as red on the fair monitor, but yesterday NOAA reported that solar activity was low, and we agreed. This is the low solar activity. This is what low solar activity looks like. So the movie shows a magnetic filament erupting on August 17 around 1200 UT. Earth orbiting satellites reported a C5 class solar flare, and SOHO observed a CME flying into space, which you can see here. The explosion released about as much energy as a billion World War II atomic bombs. Only on the Sun, which itself is 10 to the 27 ton self-contained nuclear explosion, which would such a blast be considered low activity. Right. So yeah, our Sun without it. And something about a comet coming into view. Now, this is predominantly Northern Hemisphere. I don't know exactly how much of a view of this one will come into the Southern Hemisphere, but I suspect that we'll eventually see it. It's called a hyperbolic comet, Nishimura. Hyperbolic comet Nishimura. A hyperbolic comet is falling into our solar system. Japanese amateur astronomer Hideo Nishimura discovered it just a few days ago in the constellation Gemini. Although it is relatively dim right now, magnitude +9, Comet Nishimura, or C/2023 P1, could soon brighten more than 100-fold to become a naked eye object in mid-September. A hyperbolic comet is a comet which, with too much energy to remain trapped inside the solar system, it will visit us only once, with the sun acting as a gravitational slingshot, sending the comet hurtling back into deep space after its flyby. So anyway, we'll try and keep you guys posted on whether that becomes a visible object here in the southern hemisphere. So apart from all that, we shall come back to the camera, and I think the final thing to say here is that as of August 18, 2023, there were 2,349 potentially hazardous asteroids. And I think that's all I can really see on space.com that's worth mentioning. So on that note, we shall conclude our broadcast for tonight. I hope you've found this session of some value and some interest. You can recap or review the cast on YouTube. YouTube does the favour of recording these missions and storing them for later use. I've got to go back and delete a whole heap because there's no point holding up old ones there. But nevertheless, you can view this and fast forward it and whatever on YouTube as soon as I stop emitting. All right, and YouTube has the stream hasn't fallen over, which is good. All right, well, like I said at the beginning of the tonight, there won't be any broadcast next Friday. That's the 25th. 25th. I've got a night off. Well, not really, but the ATV QSO party is on, which means that the ATV repeater, VK3 RTV, digital channel 1 and 2, will be fully occupied with activity from amateur TV operators around the place. And then Saturday, there will be crosses to America, to the ATV groups over there that will come in via the internet and be seen on the repeater as well. You'll be able to view the activity via the British Amateur Television Club video server and or Ian VK3 Quebec Lima, VK3QL's YouTube channel. He should have that running mostly Friday night. I'd say he'd have that running, but I'm not too sure about Saturday, but he may. I suspect he will. Anyway, so that's next week, so we won't be there, but we'll be back the following Friday, which will be the 1st of September, sorry. I want this year to hurry up, it seems. So, yeah, we'll be back on the 1st with sky notes from Tanya Hill and any interesting images from the Russian and or the Indian probes that are down there at the South Pole of the Moon. So on that note, any information you want to find out about the ASV, Astronomical Society of Victoria, please go to the website at www.asv.org.au and all will be revealed. Okay, on that note, we wish all the best for the Matildas tomorrow. We're very disappointed that they didn't get into the into the final. Anyway, but let's hope that they get that bronze, third place. So I'll be watching it. That's for sure. I've really got sucked into all that. So I hope they get through. I suspect that they will. Okay, on that note, let's open up the channel 3541, and there are 3 people that sent in emails. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Stephen, for your emails. I had those off the screen. They were up the page. When I cursored down there, they were. So thank you for the emails, chaps. And also to everybody else that's come up on Discord as well. No worries, Kim. Okay, let's listen to 3541. Let me just bring up the volume there a little bit. So a little bit of audio can be fed back over the YouTube channel and the TV channel. And let's see if we can pick up everybody here. Just changing my paper here. Everybody's on waiting to transmit. I can just see it. This is VK3EKH listening on 3541. Okay, just turn that down. VK3GL, VK3JR, VK3TJS, VK3DX, VK3KIS. Now there was a double with Andrew there, VK3KIS. Who was the other station?
VK3 Tango Zulu Echo, VK3 TZD. I think I doubled 2, Clint, VK3 SPX.
Right. Okay, thanks, Steve. VK3 SPX. VK3 Tango Echo Sierra, was it?
VK3 Tango Zulu Echo, VK3 TZD, Jamie, handle of Jamie, Doncaster East.
Good on you, Jamie. No worries. Gotcha. All right. Okay, to the top of the list. I think there was a weaker station. Is there any other stations? VK3EKH? Okay. To the top of the list, VK3GL, VK3EKH. G'day, Gray.
Yeah, g'day, Clint. Very good evening to you, VK3EKH, VK3GL down in Bunyip. And a very pleasant good evening to everyone else who's checked in tonight. Pretty much hear everyone who called in. Good signals from you tonight there, Clint. Your usual 20 and 30 over 9, so come through quite nicely indeed, that's for sure. Some great articles there this evening of interest as well. I certainly like the little bit that you spoke about the astronauts accidents and so on and so forth. It brought me back to some memory of standing on the launching pad over in Florida at the Kennedy Space Center, where some astronauts had perished. I think that was the one that they didn't even get off the ground. I think that might have been the ones that caught fire in the capsule at the launch pad. I'm pretty sure it might have been that one. So yeah, very interesting to hear all of that. And of course we know about all the most recent ones with the challenges and so on and so forth that have occurred as well. But I guess that's ultimately the price you pay when you're going into uncharted territories. And, unfortunately things, best laid plans go wrong. Fortunately, we haven't had any of those sorts of things with the most recent activity, but certainly in the testing phase, SpaceX and those sorts of places, they had issues trying to launch some of their vehicles. So there we go. And also very good on the space weather article this evening as well. Quite interesting to hear about all of that and what's going on, and some of those auroras that at this time of year it's a bit difficult. If we've got aurora that's around the southern hemisphere, it's pretty difficult to see it because we're under cloud cover half the time. Makes it quite difficult to be able to see down towards the south. But certainly as things roll on, if we're going to get a few more of these events, it should be quite good to have a look over summer and see what's coming up light-wise from down south. Anyway, I'll put it back to there. Glenn might have brief words to you after the check-ins tonight, but thanks again for the broadcast, all very interesting for sure. VK3EKH, VK3GL.
Yes, VK3GL, VK3EKH. Thank you, Graham, for the report. And you're about peaking almost 30 over 9 here tonight. Good signals for sure. And yes, you've had the opportunity of getting overseas to these places. I'll probably never get there, but yeah, it's quite good that you've had a chance to go and visit NASA and all those particular touristy things. So all very good stuff indeed. Okay, thanks, Graham. Across to Frank, VK3JR, VK3EKH.
VK3EKH, VK3JR. Good evening, Cliff. Good evening, everyone. And you're exceptionally strong tonight, Cliff. Exceptionally strong. Thank you for the broadcast. Most interesting. Always enjoy Tamatha, as you know, and the space weather. It's good that things are continuing along pretty well with the DX situation. Likely to get perhaps even better. It's all good. There'll be missions tonight, and otherwise I have nothing special to say. So thanks for doing it, and look forward to talking the week after next. Enjoy whatever you're doing next Friday. VK3EKH, VK3JR.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. VK3JR, VK3EKH returning. Not a problem, Frank, and thanks for the heads up on the missions. We'll have a volume up for that for sure. And my back's playing up tonight. Again, we're got the A2V QSO party happening next Friday, so that'll be a full-on thing. Anyway, thanks, Frank. And yes, you're quite right. I think we're still racing up to the peak of this solar cycle. So there's lots to happen still in the next 12 months or so. Jack, VK3TJS, VK3EKH.
VK3EKH, and the group, this is VK3TJS. Thanks very much for the broadcast, and quite good. 20 over all the way pretty much, so excellent quality and interesting stuff. And Graham, I'm pretty sure you were very excited to be there and witnessing the launch, and fortunately ended up tragically, but still quite memorable thing. So, and Clint, you better recover with your back for the party that you're going to have next week, I think. So, all the best to you, and hope you have a good weekend. And everyone else as well. And just a bit of a plug-in, don't forget about the Shepparton Hamfest on the 10th of September. And it should be a good day. With this, 732 all, thank you very much again for the broadcast, and have a good night. VK3EKH, VK3TJS, Shepparton.
Good on you, Jack. VK3TJS, VK3EKH returning, very good. And okay on the Hamfest too. It's been ages since I've been to a Hamfest, so definitely. I'm not sure when. What is it? I'll probably try to head down to the Rosebud when that occurs next, maybe, perhaps. But nevertheless, thanks, Jack. Good signal from you too. You're about 20. Both Frank and Jack, you both equal at around about 20 over 9 tonight. So it's good to see that 80 metre propagations are happening. But yeah, likewise, Jack. Have a good weekend, and look, I should be right. It'll be a quiet weekend here. I won't be doing anything too strenuous. Greg down at Warrnambool, VK3 Delta X-Ray, VK3EKH. Take it away.
Yeah, good on you, Clint. VK3EKH.
Warrnambool.
And good evening to the others there. I heard Graham, Frank and Jack. Yeah, won't be able to get to the Shepparton Hamfest this year, Jack, but we'll be there next year. But all good, and that's my catch up with you at Rosebud in Clint, by the sound of things. That's the next one we'll be heading for. Usually good Hamfest there at Rosebud. Interesting night tonight there, Clint. Everything received and all good there. So I'll put in a bit of a plug to the International Lighthouse weekend this weekend too. We'll be operating down here at Warrnambool. What's the call sign? For the International Lighthouse weekend, there's a group over in Portland, and all around the coast. So we're just hoping the weather's going to be good enough there, Clint. We're a bit exposed, but will be some weather stuff for us. Anyway, Clint, won't hold it, mate. No broadcast next week. VK3EKH, thanks for running the next week, and good evening to all. VK3 Delta X-Ray, Greg in Warrnambool.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. VK3 Delta X-Ray, VK3EKH, and try to have a comfortable time at the Lighthouse weekend. I can imagine it'd be a bit nippy, being in those places, but I guess it all depends on where you shack up in whether it's undercover or outside under a tent. But it's a very very good weekend, isn't it? The amount of folks that head out to those lighthouses, it's quite good that activity continues to rock and roll. Thanks, Greg. Now it's across to Andrew, VK3KIS, VK3EKH.
VK3EKH, VK3EKIS. Yes, good evening, Clint, and all in the broadcast. Hope everyone is keeping well. Frank, good to hear you out there. I haven't heard from Leighton, so hope everything's going well with Leighton's trip. And Jamie, also heard you out there. I think you're next camp off the rank. But Clint, yeah, all good stuff. I was quite surprised that the Stereo A satellite is in the same side of the Earth. I thought that they had set them up at the Lagrange points where Stereo A and Stereo B were going to remain in those positions, but I guess I didn't quite understand that when they launched them. But amazing stuff to be able to see the sun and the other side of the sun at the same time with the technology we have. Anyway, keep warm, and I'll say 73 VK3EKIS back here.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. VK3KIS, VK3EKH. Yeah, look, I think the technology in getting probes into space has come a long way. When the astrophysicists and scientists know what they're doing, they can literally pinpoint the location for these probes to operate perfectly well, and to get long-term use out of them as well. And parking some of these probes in the Lagrange points is quite a feat. There's actually quite a few satellites or probes that are sitting in these particular locations, and there's a few of them actually. So yeah, it's amazing stuff. It really is. And parking these probes at quite a distance too from Earth. So it's really our deep space network that keeps in tabs with all these probes. Are really got a busy schedule, that is for sure. Thanks, Andrew. And okay, we're now across to Jamie, VK3TZE. I think you said Doncaster. VK3TZE. G'day, VK3EKH. Yeah, thanks, Jamie. VK3TZE, VK3EKH returning. Very good. Good to hear you. Not as strong as some of the other chaps out there tonight, but you're hovering just above S9, so not doing too bad at all. But good to hear you, Jamie. Thanks for calling in. And yeah, have a look out for the activity next Friday and Saturday. There's going to be quite a few ATV stations coming up on the screen and showing their mugs on the screen, and maybe run a short video of their station and stuff like that. When the Americans get on, they usually have much longer overs. We try to tell them, look, keep to a couple of minutes, but they tend to waffle on a bit and show their shacks off as they would. So anyway, but it should be a bit of fun anyway. So all very good. Thanks, Jamie. There's something else. Not too certain if you've heard the broadcast here before, but the broadcast has been around since 1988. If you go to qrz.com, type in VK3EKH, qrz.com, a little bit more information about the station as such is there, and a few pictures. But invariably we're here every Friday night, 10 o'clock on 3541. So except for next week. Thanks, Jamie. Steve, VK3SPX, VK3EKH.
VK3EKH, VK3SPX. Hi, Clint. Thanks for the broadcast. It was an interesting theme, I thought, today. A bit scary in some places, wasn't it? Dangerous place, space, or even on Earth, playing with spacecraft. I was interested in that depressurization accident that they had at NASA. What happens to a human if exposed to space is a bit of a theme in science fiction occasionally, isn't it? And generally thought to be survivable for a short period of time. I think I watched a Strange New Worlds episode, and they had that same sort of thing happening. An episode I watched a few days ago. So, but this guy conked out in about 5 seconds, didn't he? I was quite surprised. He was just out like a light, very soon after. I had a ride in a RWS decompression chamber many years ago, probably about 25 years ago, to practice what happens if you decompressed in a glider. They took us up to 20,000 feet in about 5 seconds, and then told us to take off the oxygen masks, and we lasted about 20 seconds before we couldn't figure out what our own name was, and they shot 100% oxygen back on, and you come alive just like someone's thrown a switch. That was a pretty amazing experience. That guy went through a somewhat lesser pressure accident, of course, so that was pretty interesting, I thought. Anyway, thanks, Clint. We'll see you, 2 weeks. VK3EKH, VK3SPX.
Yeah, no worries, Steve. VK3SPX, VK3EKH, and a good signal from you to about 20 over 9. Yeah, look, I thought it was rather interesting that the article included that video footage. So it only went for 3 minutes, but in that 3 minutes there was a lot of interesting footage from long ago, particularly the shot inside the chamber. And of course, seeing the bloke collapse. So, how dangerous was that, really? The early space program certainly had a lot of risks, and it still does today. But here we are wanting to get back to the moon. So we can only hope that the people that are so engaged in getting us back to the moon have safety well and truly in the forefront, which no doubt they have, and that the ship that will be used to get them there and back will be perfectly safe craft to do the journey in, which I'm sure it will. So it's looking forward to all that activity. Anyway, all right, thanks, Steve, and thanks for the report on the email too. Appreciate that. All right, is there any other stations wishing to check in tonight? VK3EKH. All right, look, thanks everybody for checking in and listening in tonight. As Steve says, we're back in 2 weeks' time on the 1st, and we'll do it all again with we'll go for 2 hours covering no, we won't do that. All right, this is VK3 Echo Kilo Hotel, the official station for the Astronomical Society of Victoria, concluding transmissions for tonight, and again, we won't be here next week, but the week after for sure, and I think that's about it. Go the Matildas. This is VK3 Echo Kilo Hotel, concluding transmission, saying a very pleasant good evening to all, and stay warm. VK3 EKH Clear.
VK3
3TZE and VK3KA, VK3JR. Good day, JB. You still there, Andrew?
Yes, I am, Frank.
Okay, I won't stick around because I've got a schedule at 11:30, which is just about now, on 160 with Steve, VK3SL. Just to say that Leighton is heading back from Darwin. He's been in Darwin for, we stayed there for a while, and he and Chris are both